Luno, the fastest, easiest way to buy Bitcoin. If you're just getting into crypto, it's the perfect place to start. Hey guys, and welcome back to the Layah Heilpern show. As usual, it's powered by Icon Plus Capital, so they're a VC firm, and it is sponsored by BlockFi. So with BlockFi, you can get really cool interest rates. I think it's pretty important given interest rates are practically zero. And if you're unfortunate enough to live across Europe, they're actually negative interest rates. So pretty rubbish. So you'll see a link somewhere and everywhere if you're interested. Now, joining me today is a good friend of mine, somebody who I actually interviewed when I first got into the space. So he is somebody that I've known for a while now, and he has a very, very interesting story. It is, of course, my good friend Joel. Joel, how are you doing?
I'm doing fantastic. Very honored to be on again. Thanks again.
Yeah, it's really good to chat to you. Like I was saying, for those that don't know, you're one of the very first people that I interviewed back in, was it 2018 when I first started working professionally in this space?
Yeah,
I think it
like
was.
that
How
sounds
are
about
you?
right. I'm doing fantastic. I mean, the world gets crazier by the minute, but in a lot of good ways as well as bad ways, and I like to focus on those.
Yeah, I think we are very aligned when it comes to the reason why we're in crypto, what we like about it in terms of freedom and everything. But before we jump into all of that, you have a super unique story. It's so interesting. Like I said, when I did the show with you, I did it because we only spoke to people who had these really weird and quirky things going on. So for those that don't know, please just tell us your story, Joel.
Yeah, so the bullet point of that is I've been living unbanked off of crypto for a little over 5 years now. So that's the short of it. And pretty much the longer of it is basically I became interested in precious metals and sound money and things with the whole before the Ron Paul revolution in American politics, but also during. And I was kind of frustrated at how everyone talks about how the money, how fiat currency is essentially, robbing from people and funding all these kinds of terrible things. But then no one was doing anything about it other than talking about it. Like, how could you say, oh, yeah, this is terrible, by the way, all I have is fiat? It just did not make sense. So I was trying to live off of not fiat. And you couldn't really do that off of gold, even though I was trying with one of the Peter Schiff's
I didn't
gold
know
backed
that.
debit cards back in the day. I was just doing what I could, but it didn't really work out. And then someone I shared a lunch with a friend in Chicago, and we had pizza, and he paid for his part of the pizza in Bitcoin. So I do have a Bitcoin pizza origin story, and
Okay.
so that's how I got started with Bitcoin, and then started using it, for the next couple of years, and then around about the end of 2015, I just decided, you know what, I'm too excited about this stuff, but
Mm.
I don't feel comfortable telling other people, "Hey, this is awesome. Get into this." If I'm just sitting in the safety of my own like little non like fiat world, saying, so in order to be able to, basically not be full of crap, I decided to
Mm.
only start living off of Bitcoin, and I did that starting at the very end of 2015. Somewhere about 6 months in, I closed my bank account as well and started living unbanked. And then by the end of the year, Bitcoin became less of an efficient means to that end. And so I started using Dash instead for, my everyday money. And then, fast forward to today, and I'm still doing it.
Okay, so just to let you know, your internet is coming in and out a bit. So I did just miss the end of what you said, but I got most of it. So the crux of that essentially is that you're living unbanked. You've been totally living off of crypto since 2016, 15, 16. I want to go back just a second because you said that you had this genuine just
Mm-hmm.
distaste towards the fiat system. And, we often talk about inflation and money printing and all of these things, but it's hard really, to explain these things to the ordinary person. So what really kind of woke you up and made you realize, damn, this system is actually in some ways perhaps, stealing from me? That's often how I look at inflation anyway. I look at it as theft. But
Yeah, well, I guess it comes back to just education. I was homeschooled, and so I come from a more non-traditional educational background, a little more free thinking, I guess, but still learning the history of money. As any child, when they're learning like what is money, you have that education of like, well, people used to trade with, they used to barter, and then they used to trade with these items, and then they finally found like precious rocks and metals, and then they turned those into coins, and then eventually that became inefficient. So these paper notes to represent the actual money, and then at some point, then there's just the paper notes, and I missed that. Like, what happened there? Like, I followed the story all the way up until the real money's gone. It just disappears, and we're gonna just play pretend with these like paper notes, because that would never have worked in the beginning. And that always puzzled me. But then also, I grew up in the north of Mexico, and right after the peso crisis of the 90s. And so like my grandmother had a bunch of old coins that just didn't work anymore. And no, those are the old ones. These are the new ones. The new ones work. And like, why do we have new ones? The old currency just didn't work. Like, and so I always think like, well, that could happen to the dollar too. And I see the exchange rate. The one that I memorized as a child was 7 pesos to the US dollar. Now I don't know what it is today, but it's got to be more than like 28 or more. And so I kind of have that mental thing of, oh, this isn't just absolutely, this isn't God given. This is something that can fluctuate in value, but more importantly, it just goes down over time. And of course, when you start to become, I'm not that old, but I'm old enough to start remembering when things were cheaper, when everything was cheaper. I remember like if you had a $10 menu item at a restaurant, that was like super fancy. It had to have a bunch of seafood in there or something.
Yeah.
And then now it's like a basic hamburger at a basic whatever. It can get them to that level. And it's probably going to be,
It's not even
maybe
that in
10
England, I'll just tell you. It's not even that here.
Yes, I did. I did my postgraduate at the University of Buckingham right by Oxford, right? And so I remember those UK prices. Oof, it's pretty crazy. Yeah. So
But I think you make
basically,
a really interesting point. Sorry, go on. I think there's a delay. Maybe it's my internet. Go on. Sorry.
yeah. So that just, the kind of long and short of it is basically I never had this illusion that money was perfect. And then of course when you start seeing about, you learn about government and spending and things like that, and it's like, okay, well, this as much comes out of taxes, this much comes out of debt, but they're spending more than all of that. And then, oh, they just print money. You hear about like, what does that even mean? And then like once you basically have an education on how the world actually works, with it doesn't have to be a tinfoil hat crazy. You know what they're really doing? They're messing up the money. You just have to have a basic understanding that anyone who's educated, even who doesn't agree with what maybe we would know, how do you reconcile those things and just think, oh, you just make fake money? Well, then if you can just make fake money to pay off things, first off, why don't you print more money and just buy everything? Like, clearly they know that there's some limits to this thing. And also, if it is fake money, why are we using fake money? Like, if they can just do this, why are we just sitting and taking it, just sitting and living under a system that, can pretty much damage us? And so when I heard about, the power of cryptocurrencies, specifically about first Bitcoin and then obviously later Dash and plenty of other ones, I still, just the fact there's only ever going to be 21 million, and in order to change that, you'd have to basically get everyone on board. And even if the people who weren't on board, they could still keep using a version of the coin that they liked. Like if most of Bitcoin decided to just, we're going to 10x the supply or whatever, and I didn't want that, and like a bunch of people like that, we would just fork off and be using, we'd still get to use the
Yeah.
money we wanted. And just that choice is, I mean, it's revolutionary. And I think that's the underpinning of, all cryptocurrency, all the value it creates. I mean, we have a whole lot of different projects that are like infinite inflation rates, or just huge supplies, or arbitrarily changed supplies, or things like that. And I think
Yes.
people have lost the plot just a little bit on like, that's not the reason we came to all this. Sure, you experiment with other fun things. Sure, maybe you have a slow, like for example, the way Monero does a tail emission or something, a slow permanent inflation, but very small. Okay, that's fine. Experiment with those things. But just the sound money principles are kind of why we're all really here, if you think about it.
Yeah, I want to go back a sec because you said something really interesting, which I really want to just echo for everyone. You spoke about your experience in Mexico, and you sort of have these memories in your head of what prices used to be. and you've seen over time what has happened. And I think
Mhm.
it's only experience which can really help you understand why we do what we do. And I think this kind of idea is the same in politics. Like, you often have people coming from previously authoritarian dictatorship type countries coming over to, let's say, the States and voting Republican because they
Mhm.
understand what
Yeah.
happened, basically. So I think that's really, really true. And for you, with everything that's all the problems in terms of inflation and everything that you've described, which really kind of put you off of the traditional system and made you go entirely unbanked, do you feel that you've actually been able to benefit in terms of literally leaving the system? I'm not going to ask you specifically about taxes, but in
Mhm.
terms of taxes, in terms of inflation, in terms of being more sovereign. It's been how many years? 6 years, did you say? 6 years,
Yeah,
5 years?
five without like 5 and a couple months without a bank account.
So have you
So,
have you felt and seen a direct benefit from that?
um, so the I definitely say yes. It's a little bit the I'm early to the process, especially because, back in the day of 2015, 2016, there wasn't a lot you could really do with Bitcoin. You could buy a few different things with it. And then I was kind of early to the whole, scaling when the scaling wars started with Bitcoin.
Hmm.
And, it kind of transferred to more of a store of value and less of an everyday payments thing. It wasn't until 2017, a year later, that Bitcoin Cash even forked off. And then that's what most people view as that. But I was already living off of Dash for a year at that point because, you know, and then at that time, I think Bitcoin had like 80% market dominance or anything anyway. And so switching to something less like an altcoin is a term you don't really hear as much today because it's just the space is so diverse. It's not all about Bitcoin anymore, but back then it was. And so there was a lot of challenges along the way, and that's for sure. But as far as have I benefited, I would say absolutely. The one thing, it's hard to really see it because it's my daily life, but then I see what other people do and like, oh, I got my
Mm.
card shut off and this, that, like, oh, this is terrible. Or, they just start worrying about purchasing power, or they have like an overdraft problem, or just there's all these different things that happen that, I have my own set of, concerns to do. But I like that I just, all the money I have is all the money I have, and that's it. It's kind of funny. The biggest thing is the KYC hurdle. And that's the thing, is in this
Mm.
whole thing, I've stayed away from like KYC services because, otherwise, like, might as well have a bank, right? And
But how
it's
do you do
kind of,
that?
well, I have a video series called How to Live on Crypto that shows me specifically all those kinds of things. But basically, uh, the process of doing KYC type services is just, it's a huge pain in the butt. Like, oh, well, you got to like do this, you got to get verified here. It's a big delay. Whereas if you just have like, have you ever received some tokens that someone tipped you on Twitter or something? Like, Twitter's full of that.
Uh,
Hey, tip bot
Nano,
5,000.
yes.
Yeah,
Nano,
of
yes.
course. Why does that not surprise me? But anyway, that's the thing, is someone just goes, here, send you some stuff. And then now you have it. You could, like, that is such a, it might sound a little dumb trying to describe this as, cool that you just send, but
No, it's so
the
cool.
fact,
It's so
can you
cool.
imagine if someone wanted to send you like a fiat over the same situation where it's like, oh, I want to send you $5. Like, where's your Venmo? Okay, well, do you have one? Okay, but before you do it, you have to go, you can get the paperwork and get verified and just, do you have a permanent address? No, if you're a nomad, sorry, you don't have a permanent address, you can't be banked. Like, it's it's pretty crazy. I was speaking with the CEO of CrayPay, of uh, a payment app company, and they were he was ranting about how he has to like rent office space for like a lot of money
Mm.
just in order to have bank accounts because they won't take a post office box and they won't accept a home address. They're like a home business or anything. You have to rent, office space just in order to have access to financial services. And if, for example, you're in between, like, let's just say your lease, you want to move to a new place, and then the old place, so you're moving between spaces, and then
Hmm.
some problem happens in with the new place that you all of a sudden you can't. You might have a temporary period where you don't have a either home address if this is your living situation or a business address, and then all of a sudden, oh, sorry, the bank, you can't have a bank account anymore. And so just the freedom of being able to just send and receive, even crappy little tokens that no one cares about, but just doesn't matter.
Mm.
Just send, receive, just I'll send you this, I'll send you that, I'll send like bits here. Here, grandma, I'm gonna send you some over here. Hey, person across the pond, I'll send you that. And it just the freedom is kind of intoxicating on that. And once you try to go back to the fiat system anyway, or you observe other people, it's a little sad, and you kind of appreciate what you get out of it.
Yeah, I think, there's so much there to unpack. And for me, it was kind of the access to financial services for everyone, which made me fall in love with cryptocurrency. Bitcoin aside, I'm not a Bitcoin maximalist. I mean, I think Bitcoin is the number one in my opinion, but I'm open to whatever, and I'm interested to see how things go. But in terms of bringing people on the financial map, it's always been that which has just warmed my heart, mainly because you see governments and charities and nonprofits and all this thing for decades trying to solve the problem of poverty, trying to help supposedly. And it's just a cycle, and nothing is really getting done. And now you have an opportunity where people can do what the hell they want with their money. I always look at Nigeria as like the most amazing example. I don't know what it is. I'm just genuinely obsessed with the situation. I find it fascinating, in that they have insane capital controls. They have, I think it's $100 a month on international payments.
That's like
how are you supposed to not okay? How do you get out of a situation like that? Like that doesn't just stop you from building wealth or living day to day, but it stops you from creating a business. It stops you from bettering your life. Like you can't do anything. So in terms of you living unbanked, how does it work? How do you get your groceries? How do you do your everyday things? Do you have, obviously, if you need a Visa card, then surely you have to do KYC. But you said you sort of didn't do KYC. So, you go down to a pub, we don't have, pubs are English, whatever. You go to a bar or whatever it is. You want to get a beer.
Call them pubs here sometimes.
Oh, do you? All right. So you go get a beer in a pub and you want to pay with a card. How on earth do you do that?
Yeah. So I happen to be blessed. Well, I mean, it was a choice, but I blessed nonetheless to live in the fantastic state of New Hampshire, which is kind of crypto ground zero, where for Gavin Andreessen came up here to some meetups, and he got the Free Talk Live radio show. He got them their first Bitcoin, I think, in 2010. Roger Ver heard about Bitcoin listening to New Hampshire radio show. Charlie Shrem has been up here to me. As Vitalik Buterin, Eric Voorhees, all these kinds of people are all here. The first Bitcoin ATM company was founded right here in New Hampshire. It's, because of that, there's a lot of businesses around here that will take crypto directly. Like, I want to get my coffee and croissant down at the La Maison Navarre in Portsmouth. Yeah, I can go do that if I want to go.
How do you do that? Wait, how are you doing that though?
So there is a company, I can give a shout out to AnyPay, that they have a crypto point of sale app that's super easy to use. And the people behind that got many, although not all of them, but many of the merchants around here to take cryptocurrency. And so I go down and I tell them I want to pay in Dash because that's what I have. That's the best, easiest spendable money that I have. And then they just enter something, turn around the iPad, and there's a QR code. I scan it and I pay it, and I'm done. And as far as I know, all the businesses around here are actually holding onto it, which is not something that you could probably see in other parts of the world. Most would want a conversion option, which are available if they want. But most places around here just take and hold that. And so
they hold the Dash. They don't turn it into USDT or anything else.
As far as I know, I'm not into people's personal finances, but as far as I know, they just hold on to it and then spend it whenever. So yeah, there's a few businesses that do that. I've been buying all my organic produce from a farm up north that has taken all kinds of cryptocurrencies directly for many years. And there's always, as far as like the in-between systems, there's this fantastic new service that's come out, in the last couple months called Dash Direct that basically lets anyone This is
Yeah.
because I had to like spend years learning how to do this kind of, and having my little world set up in a way that works for me. But Dash Direct basically allows you to spend Dash at 155,000 plus merchants in the US and hopefully soon expanding to other countries. It basically, you walk into a merchant, you let's say the total is 2357. You enter that into the app, you hit pay, it brings up your little Dash wallet, you pay for it there, and then it presents a barcode that then you can show. And then they scan the barcode and you pay. And this is at like major retailers. Whereas the places I spend Dash without an app like this are minor or like small like local businesses. But if you want to go to say, a Starbucks or a Panera or something like that, or you want to go to a Home Depot for a home improvement project, then that's
Mm.
kind of how you do it. And sometimes you can save up to like 15% on this app. And so I personally believe that this is what's going to be the last. It's going to be the beginning of what we find, that mass adoption, because we've tried all kinds of adoption things, and it's just too
Mm.
much of a pain in the butt for someone to buy cryptocurrency and then try to figure out how to spend it. So people aren't going to do it. But if you have an app that just
Mm.
has a geolocation feature on it, just says you can spend it at these 5 places right next to you, and we'll even like connect to your maps to show you to go there. And it's a super simple process of doing it, and you can save like, let's just say 5-8% or something on the purchase doing it. You're probably going to want to do that, and it's just and even better, it's a no KYC service and non-custodial, because there are some other services that are intermediary payment things that let you pay with cryptocurrency. Like I'm sure PayPal's debuting a thing of their own. But for example, something like, let's say, Flexa, which I'm not throwing shade at Flexa, because any way you can spend crypto in the real world is good. But there's a custodial element to it, and there is a
Mhm.
KYC element to it. And so yeah, that's basically what fills in the rest of the gaps around those little favorite places I like to go to spend it directly, where I know the owner is hodling it. Uh, Anything else, any of these big box type stores, I can use this one app, and that just takes care of just about everything else.
Is it available worldwide? Is it available in England, do you know? Or is it
It's
just in
US
America right
it's
now?
US only, and they're working hard on getting Canada, and then, then Europe and etc. But I mean, it's a lot of work to do something. I mean, 155,000 merchants in one go, and people are already complaining, it's not my country yet. Well, just wait, just wait. They're doing
That's a good
working
thing.
their
It's a
best.
good thing. No, I think that's a great thing. If
Yeah.
people are complaining, I'm shaking my head. People are obviously impressed by the
Mhm.
service. No
Mhm.
KYC, and you can go ahead and spend.
Mhm.
Sounds like what dreams are made of. So I have a bit of an interesting question for you. It's a bit of a side topic, and it's more just about like relationships and friendships, really. Because often people talk about when they're involved in crypto. It kind of hinders their friendships in the real world. I'll explain. I don't mean because you're so headfirst into on the internet and you become an absolute recluse. I don't mean that. I
It
mean
means
more
because you
because
become a toxic maximalist and no one likes you anymore. Just kidding,
not even
obviously.
that. Not even that.
I'm kidding. Yeah.
Because mainly because you start to see the world in a different kind of way, and
Mhm.
you become awake. People often get very cringed out by this analogy, but I really don't care. I think it's fantastic. You're sort of awake to the truths of what is going on, and often your political views tend to fall quite in line with your libertarian, can you leave me alone, leave my wallet alone, leave my money alone kind of view.
Mhm.
um so I'm wondering whether, you sort of, as you went on this journey, because you are fully unbanked, so
Mhm.
you're fully believing in this, you're not one foot in or one foot out.
Of course.
Whether that kind of affected any of your personal relationships, and people sort of thought, all right, I don't know this guy anymore.
Yeah, that has not at all been the case with me, but that's only because I took it the other way around, right? A lot of
Okay.
people, normies doing whatever, and then they hear about this cool technology, and then as they start that's like their first step in the rabbit hole. They're like, "Oh, I realized that the money's fake. What else are they lying to us about?" And then it just goes down from there. Whereas I already came from that direction, I'm just passing on the other way. I'm just saying, like, I already realized that they were before I knew what crypto was. I already knew the government was inflating away my future. I already knew that there was endless wars being fought on my dime for no tangible benefit. I already knew that my rights were being trampled and I was being surveilled, all this kind of stuff. I already knew all that coming in. So a lot of the people who I interacted with, or a lot of the people who ended up being close to me, ended up, yes, that there has been a shift in community around me for sure over time, but it like the crypto is just the latest part of this whole journey. And I should also give a mention, because when I moved out to New Hampshire, not just because it's a fantastic place to live and anyone should visit, especially if they're into crypto, but it's because there's this thing called the Free State Project, which basically indicates that everyone who believes in freedom, again, like this whole red pilled movement, everyone feeling isolated can come to one spot, just move in one place. It's called the live free or die is the slogan of the state. Like it has freedom in its veins forever. But everyone can come here and just live free altogether and not be alone anymore. And there's a reason why so many headlines about all this freedom thing out, is all out of New Hampshire, is because of this kind of thing. So basically, there's a built-in strong community of people here that are like that. So I would say any crypto person who's feeling, I don't know, a little alienated, a little lonesome now that they can't relate to their normal friends anymore because they started on this road. Well, there's a whole group of people right here waiting for you that already believe the exact same stuff, and they're already there with you. They're not going to look at you weird for they already know, they're already awake to all this stuff.
That's really interesting that it's this freedom loving kind of safe haven. Did you guys ever have a lockdown by any chance?
Not really. There was some, as
Wow.
it were, there was some of these governor's orders that were basically like, well, you should probably wear a mask, but if you have for any other loophole or whatever kind of thing, you can do it. So basically, my life has not changed over the last couple of years, and there was some controversy over even those very light kind of suggestive things, and the legislature immediately passed. I mean, that was one thing that got done this year: restrictions on further emergency powers of the governor, so nothing even can be approximated like that in the future. And there were a couple of businesses that got fined for operating, but the government refunded their fines, which I don't think that's happened anywhere else in the world, right? That it's like, oh yeah,
So
we got
wait,
a
wait,
little
wait.
crazy. Yes.
So wait, wait, wait. You've had no lockdown and things have
Well,
basically been normal over the last 18 months, roughly.
yes. So there was a short period of like a month or so that certain businesses were not supposed to operate, like to have like in-person people, for example. And there was a couple that got fined for not doing that. And after that got changed, basically it was a very, very light situation. Like, and even then, that got the ability to do so has been changed, so that can never happen again. And the businesses affected that were actually refunded by the government. Which,
Incredible.
and so basically, yeah, we're good to go for the future.
And obviously I'm English, so I don't know
Mhm.
every single spot on the map. Explain to me exactly where New Hampshire is.
It's basically, so if you start Florida and go straight up,
Yeah.
and basically right when you hit Canada, it's right there.
Oh,
It's
it's right at the
it's
top on the top.
yes,
Okay.
it's very close to, where Boston is. It's
Yeah.
very close to Boston, just north of Boston, like an
Oh
hour
my
drive.
gosh.
So
It's crazy. I'll have to come. Like I have to check that out. I am a freedom
absolutely.
loving person. Like
Well, there's
for
plenty of it
me,
over here.
freedom. Yeah, I mean, for me, freedom above everything, which takes me on to so many other exciting topics we could talk about. But before I go
Absolutely.
into that, I do wanna actually get your thoughts on CBDCs. I have a
Mhm.
particular passion and dislike towards them. I wondered whether you thought that could potentially, let's say, replace cryptocurrencies, take down cryptocurrencies. Do you like them?
Yeah, so I'm not a fan, obviously, because the CB part is fiat, right? So I'm like, I have no use for them. It's not like a lot of other people think that, oh, this is what's going to start crypto adoption for most people. But like I've already been there for a half decade. Like I don't need this stuff. Uh, but so honestly, fiat, like CBDCs are being billed as something radically different, and all it is fiat with more efficient, modernized payment rails. That's just it.
Mhm.
Like the entire, and I always like hesitate to speak too much on this because from my knowledge, I guess the European banking system is significantly better than the American banking system. Like the American banking system is old and antiquated and terrible. And modernizing that, I think, is, well, here's the thing. I think it's a good thing, I guess, but it's still missing the point. It's still going to be fiat because the magic of crypto is that you can independently verify transactions anywhere. Are we going to have a radically transparent USD central bank cryptocurrency? Is it going to be a radically transparent blockchain where you can see all the money that the government's stealing, where it's going? Are they really going to make that? Or also,
It'll be
am I
transparent
going to?
in one way. Like it won't go two ways. It'll be one way, transparent.
Yeah, and so can I send my USD coin or whatever? Can I just send it to you on Twitter to like a random, person on Twitter with like an anime character as their like profile picture and just thoughtlessly like
Probably
that and
not.
they can just claim it? Well, no. So it's that's been the kind of stablecoin myth is a lot of people have been very into stablecoins and stablecoins first off they're pegged to fiat mostly. And so the entire reason we got into crypto was to not have a constantly devalued money. But so we make a crypto that constantly devalues, just like the dollar. It's like a little. I understand for traders, the only reason like stable coins really exist, if you ask me, is because they managed to get into a regulatory loophole where they don't have to do KYC and these other things with the fiat system, but they are still kind of fiat. But as soon as if the government regulated stablecoins like fiat, they would just disappear overnight, basically. And the same thing with CBDCs is it just no one's going to be excited about this stuff unless they offer something new. Are they going to provide better, freedom of transacting and fewer, KYC hookups and or KYC barriers and things? I don't think so because what if they do though? What if the governments say, you know what, this crypto stuff is going to destroy us. So let's make a halfway crypto, halfway fiat coin that provides more freedom than fiat, but still people can have their transactions traced and stuff like that. I mean, I still wouldn't use it, but that would be a net benefit for humanity, I think. I mean, I don't think that's where we need to be. We don't need to care about that stuff though. We can already use, better things. And I think that, we talk about, the great El Salvador experiment, but also other
Mm.
countries and stuff that are starting to like once you can just say, I don't have to develop my own CBDC, I can just adopt cryptocurrency as legal tender and offer certain tax incentives and stuff for cryptocurrency businesses and get this giant industry just all there. I don't really see CBDCs being like I think their part in the world, the new world, will be much smaller than the central banks issued old currencies in the old world.
I hope so. I think you make an important distinction between the European banking system and the American banking system because you're absolutely right. Only up until about a year ago did I know that Americans couldn't do instant bank transfers for free. I know you have like Venmo and all these things. That is weird.
Yeah.
We can send money to each other for free instantly.
Yeah,
So
you know where it kind of like woke me up to this stuff? There was a project that I don't know exactly where it is today, but a digital cash type cryptocurrency based in the Netherlands called Gulden. And they had a very interesting feature in their wallet where, first off, they had like an auto converter where you could send this cryptocurrency to a Bitcoin address and it would, in the background, for zero fee or no, or zero confirmation. So instantly convert it to Bitcoin and then send it. So it was like you can spend it anywhere. Golden's accepted and Bitcoin, but
mhm.
you could also put in an IBAN number into that, into like your full node wallet, and then you send it and up to a certain amount per week or whatever. It was like no KYC. You could just send euros to someone's bank account. And I just thought that was like, wow, you mean you get to just send someone money and the government doesn't need your ID? Like, that's really cool. I mean, obviously a very small limit, like 50 euros a week or something like that. But I still, I was like, if you want to send $5, there's going to be like a $5 fee or something or more.
Mm-mm.
And then it's going to be, you have to do your ID. And so, yeah, that's kind of what woke me up. Funny that crypto instructed me on the differences in the banking systems.
Yeah, it always does. It always wakes you up to the problems and things that you didn't know. But yeah, like I said, we can just send like £10 instantly for free, and it's super easy. So I'm kind of fascinated by the fact that you can't. But my thing is that CBDCs will be marketed so well. And I think one of the ways in which they'll be marketed is we'll be told that it'll be better for the environment. We'll be told that it will help save the world in terms of poverty because it can be programmable, and we can make it we can make it work for these certain things and food benefits and this and that, and it overall it's just a more efficient enslavement machine in that it will be easier to
probably. No, the
do
thing
what they
is,
do.
like, as far as the marketing thing, I'm not worried necessarily about that, because one thing I've learned over, it's a hard lesson maybe that, I already kind of understood before, but I understood better over time, is that the free market is undefeated. You can't
Okay.
tell people what is going to be valued or what won't be valued. And so, like, for example, whenever you look at the coin market cap rankings, you just like, what's that one doing up there?
That's true.
How come people are investing in this? And you try to say, like, people are wrong, people are stupid. It's like, no, you're stupid. Not stupid, but you're like, you don't understand.
I don't know.
And
I don't know, Joel. I don't think no. So sorry, I am cutting you off, but
yes,
my problem is I think the majority of the world is very much asleep, and if the last 18 months has shown us anything, it's shown us that. And I do think that people are always looking for an answer. They're looking to better their lives, and I do believe that this will be marketed as a way to better their lives. Airdropping money and lots of exciting new things that you can do with money. I do think it will be marketed as this shiny new coin which will help solve poverty. Like, I genuinely think, and I genuinely believe that people will believe that, and they'll also be told at the same time that things like Bitcoin are bad for the environment, other cryptocurrencies are scams, it's anonymous, it's dangerous, and that will deter people away from that.
Yeah, so I sort of disagree that that's where the threat's coming from. I do agree that we will have threats from CBDCs, but it's a different direction. I think that the threat from CBDCs is all their old fiat gets turned into new fiat, and the tracking and analytics of this new fiat will be 10 times worse than what they can already trace for your payments before. I think that's the real problem, where people get to see every little bit of money that gets sent. They have much better, because blockchains are radically transparent, and maybe not to the rest of the public, but they'll be able to do it. I think that's the Trojan horse. Now, that people don't buy Bitcoin because they heard good things about it over the last decade or so. I mean, there've been the whole, oh, it's a scam, it's a this, it's a, drug money, it's all this bad for the environment, yet the price keeps going up because there's a demand for it. People want to be basically the number one thing that cryptocurrencies have solved, which I thought it was going to be number 2 or 3 or 4, but it turned out to be number 1 in the short term, is it lets people make money. People want to make money. Like, it sounds like the stupidest thing I'm ever telling you. Like, of course, everyone knows you want to make money, but that's why people love Dogecoin. You can buy some, and then you can get ahead in life. And the investing, like, if you haven't spoken to Ken Bozak yet, I believe you should, because he's I believe also unbanked on crypto, but he's a completely opposite kind of end of the spectrum. He's into the NFT craze and all that stuff, but he got into crypto because he wanted to invest. When he started to see some gray hairs in his beard. He's like, I'm an adult now, I need to do adult things. What do adults do? Well, they invest. And so he goes to his bank and says, I heard about this Snapchat thing, I want to invest in Snapchat. And they just laugh at him like, you're not an accredited investor, what are you talking about? Like, you can't get in on that. And so he got really sad. Like, I tried to be an adult, I couldn't. And then he hears, oh, I can just buy this Bitcoin stuff, and I don't need to be a fancy accredited anything. And so he does, and it gets in. And the simplicity of that story that I tell endlessly is that people just want to be able to. The average person can't really invest. There's all this, like, these barriers between them and this. The average person can buy basically whatever they want with their card, for example, but they can't invest. So that's the number one value. People want to invest and make more money, and they can't. So crypto does that for them. And if the CBDC says, oh, it's all dark money over there, and use this one, they don't care, because they can't buy like 50, 100 pounds worth of Naira or whatever the hell they have going on in Nigeria, and then, like, all of a sudden they're going to get it rich off of that. It's not going to work. So they're not going to do that. They're going to buy Bitcoin, Dogecoin, whatever else. They're going to buy, they're going to liquidity farm and stake a million times over with the DeFi and get 200x rewards over. Like, that's what they're going to do. And unless you stop them from doing that, I don't see CBDCs stopping that in the slightest. I just see it as replacing old fiat with increased surveillance powers.
I definitely agree with you in terms of increased surveillance powers, the privacy that we have now, the small amount of privacy that we have left will certainly be made even smaller. But yeah, no, I'm totally with you. We're so lucky, and I talk about this all the time, that we are in a market which is so brand new. The kind of gains that you can make right now, you certainly won't be able to make in like 20 years time unless it's in a new kind of emerging market. And that kind of takes me back to the problems with the education system, which I'm so passionate about. I absolutely think it's a waste of time and energy, and well, actually it's not a waste of time and energy, because it's created for a purpose and to be a certain way, and to create certain types of people. But what upsets me is that we don't know how to invest. We don't know that we need to invest. We don't know what inflation is. And a lot of the time, which I find so fascinating, is people often come to Bitcoin not because they know that there's a problem, but because they just sort of heard of Bitcoin and it's new and it's cool and it's shiny. And then you get there and you're like, oh shit, there really is a problem. Thank God I have it. I wouldn't know what to invest in if it wasn't for Bitcoin and my time in this industry.
Yeah, also investing is a luxury for a lot of people. If you think about this, and this is where, the red pill moment where you hit into, like, people are, I don't want to be hyperbolic, but why not?
Do it.
People are debt slaves. I don't know how bad it is in other countries, but at least in the US, you don't own the house, you own the bank owns it. You have to make constant payments or you become homeless. And you don't own the vehicle you drive. There's a loan on that. You make a payment on that. You a lot of times buy stuff with a credit card and you have that bill to go. And you're locked into bills all the time. And so you go to a job that you hate and pay tons of taxes on it. And you need to, because otherwise your life falls apart if you don't have that constant stream going in. And where do you have any money to invest and see it go up? You're stuck in this, you're stuck not getting ahead and independent, because once you have enough money to a certain degree, more money at some point is just more money, but like at some point it enables you to be free. And once you're free, you start questioning things that your government's telling you, et cetera, et cetera. And so that's why only the big fish get to invest in the legacy systems. But then imagine if you own your vehicle, you own your house, you don't have debt on that, although you never own your house in the US because of property taxes, because you have to pay on money taxes every year and just owning a thing. But that's a different story. But so what if you own that stuff? You don't have debt. All your money is your money. You pay your bills, and whatever's left over, you're like, well, I'm going to spend half of this on going out and getting drinks because I'm a human being. But the other half, I'm going to go put into something that I think is going to go up over time. And you just, over the course of a few years, you now have an investment that, could have done poorly, but could have done fantastically well, especially if you're allowed to invest in the newest things, like, let's say, cryptocurrency, as opposed to just like all the, whatever else people invest in, right? And then all of a sudden you can secure a future and you're not just locked into the thing. Now you can tell your boss that, you know what, I don't think this is the right career for me. I've done it enough. I'm going to go start my own podcast. I'm going to go start my own small business. I'm going to do whatever else because I have the investment given wealth now to be able to do that. But you can't do that if you're locked into the debt slave system. And especially, like, I think a lot more people would seek to get out of that if they knew they could just, buy some Dogecoin or whatever. I don't want to keep bringing up Dogecoin. I hope people don't buy Dogecoin because I don't think it's going to be going out forever. But it's an example of, if people have a goal, they can change their life. But if people are just like, well, I have to be really rich to actually invest, then they won't even try to invest at a small level. And it's funny. I had I believe it was Doug Scribner, who's the CEO of an ATM company, a Bitcoin ATM company. I interviewed him one time. He told me that the lower class, for their investment, is lottery tickets. because like
Mm.
every paycheck they get, they buy a few lottery tickets, and it's mostly for nothing, but that's literally how they invest. Like they put it towards chipping away at the percentage chance that they will have an investment, a retirement money someday. And so, I mean, that's a little sad to think that that's an investment thing, but it's also genius that even people with, I would say, the lower levels of financial education understand investment, and they understand that they
Hmm.
should be investing. And even if they do it through like maybe not the most advisable things, by like, I'm going to hit it big someday, I'm going to throw, they're still trying to invest. What if those same people, instead of going to the lottery ticket machine, go to the, let's say the Bitcoin ATM and buy whatever? Like, oh, I'm going to put $100. And people do this, by the way. They go like put $100 in, and they get some, put their phone up, and they get some crypto out of it, and they just repeat buy over time. And yeah, then all of a sudden, oh, in a few years, like you put $500 worth over the course of a couple years, and now all of a sudden it's like 5,000 or something. Now you can afford
Good.
like a vacation or something, for example. Now you can go take a nice holiday, and it's you can afford it without, so yeah, I don't know how to conclude that whole thought, but
You
those
don't
are
need to conclude it. You don't need to conclude it. I'm totally with you. I think that it's really just like the land of opportunity. And sometimes I do sound like a broken record, but for me, this entire space is the new 21st century American dream where we are so early and also because it's so unregulated. You know how like a lot of
Mhm,
industries and a lot of major players were able to achieve so much back in the day because there were less regulation. It was true capitalism.
mhm,
And that sort of reminds me of what we have now. And yeah, I'm totally with you. Like I said before, I wouldn't know what to invest in. Now I know, like if I do want to start investing in the stock market, now I know. And
mhm,
I'll think about that when the time comes. But what for me, everything, and I think also for you, everything sort of comes down to this idea of freedom.
mhm.
So we have like a few minutes left. So I just kind of want to get your thoughts on really just if you could just summarize why you feel freedom is so important, particularly in today's day and age, where we have lockdowns, we have, and I will say, coerced
Yeah.
vaccines and things like this, and how Bitcoin comes into play and everything else. Why for you is freedom so important?
Yes. So I'm going to start with a hyperbolic statement that's not, it's not like the other ones, which is, a little bit more true, but
It's okay.
this is more conceptual, right? Is without without fr- lack of freedom is murder. Let me explain that. Uh, we are born onto this earth with a ticking time bomb of how many days do we have left before we're gone. And I mean, people have all kinds of different religious and metaphysical opinions and things like that. But one thing that everyone sort of agrees on is we have this life, and I
Hmm.
don't know if we have anything else. Like once we're old and we die, that could be it for what we are as a person. Just we're gone, right? During this time, you have nothing but endless possibilities. And that's the beauty of life. You can do anything you want. You just like I want to become a karate champion, and you can do that, right? Oh, I want to I want to surf for a living, or I want to invest and have a giant like boat and just like drive around. Whatever your ideas or dreams or whatever. You want to be a scientist. I want to invent a new something. I want to go to the moon. I don't care. People have all kinds of things, and freedom is what lets you do any of these things. And so
Hmm.
literally when you are upset that someone dies or gets killed, it's like, oh, that's a tragedy. Well, we're all headed for that direction. And the problem is their freedom is cut off short. They run out of options of things to do in life. Let's say they're like 24 and they get into a bad vehicle accident, and they're gone. Like, it's not that, well, they were always going to die, but because they died so early, there's so many possibilities that are not there for them anymore. And in the same way, if you can't pursue your dreams because you're taxed too heavily or you're regulated too heavily or whatever, if you can't live life to your fullest, that is a slow murder. It's a slow death of all the different options and things you could do with your life. You're just locked in, and it's just it's like a long torturous existence. And so that's for me what freedom is the ability to do just about anything. And the economics is a great way of measuring, I guess, human potential. although it's just one metric, because you can't measure like the human spirit and its achievements in a objective way, because there's just so much that can be done. But with it's kind of an interesting thing to see when there's more freedom, like objective freedom, like people can do what they want, then the economy takes off. Like people build more things, people have more food, they have more everything. It just, and so that's a sign that like freedom is synonymous with human flourishing. And we want humanity to flourish, don't we? I want myself personally to flourish. I want you to flourish. I want everyone to flourish. And so if we're free, that's what happens. And so it's freedom isn't it isn't critically important. It's everything. Like, what do we have if we don't have freedom? Everything we do in life, we work hard so we have money, so we have the freedom to just live in our house. We don't, or freedom to go someplace, or we whatever. That's all we aspire to do, is the freedom to do what we want. And basically, the only reason people don't value freedom is either they're using a lack of freedom to further their own ends, as in they're literally preying on people, they're predators, or their freedom is too plentiful for them to see.
I'm still
Because
here.
yeah, freedom is only it's only seen with a contrast. So if
Yes,
you,
correct. Yeah.
it's just like, as I say, like freedom is like water, in that no one's going to pay a lot of money for water, but it's so crucial to life. It's not until it becomes scarce that you see the price go up, pretty basic economics. And so same thing with freedom. People have been able to do just whatever they want for the most part in the developed world, at least. And this whole like, well, just put this mask on, do this, just don't worry about that, like those kind, like that won't last very long, because once freedom starts to become more and more scarce, that pumps up the price. The price of freedom is going to go through the roof pretty soon, and we're going to see that. And these kinds of poetic speeches of like, oh, it's everything, and when your freedom is restricted, that's like a slow murder, and all this hyperbolic nonsense I've been talking about won't be necessary, because the market price of freedom is going to go through the roof when it gets
I
restricted.
hope
And
so.
people in 2020, as far as I know, over 100,000 people left California, and over 100,000 people left New York because of a lack of freedom, and they moved to freer parts of the United States. You don't think that that's going to happen even more in the world? You don't think a bunch of Australians are just never going to find a way on little rafts across the ocean or whatever they do to get the hell out of that dystopian hellhole and find a free place? You don't think we're going to see the free market adjust for this spike in the price of freedom due to scarcity? I think we will.
It's a really interesting way to look at it. I think everything does come back to supply and demand. I talk a lot about that in terms of like happiness in life versus like entertainment value and all that sort of thing. But yeah, you're totally right. I think freedom is the most beautiful thing that we can have as humans, and I think it's so sad to see that it eroded, and to see people not understand the value in it. And this kind of comes back to what we were talking about at the beginning of the conversation, when I was sort of saying, only experience can really allow you to understand. And what I would say is, because it's just like what you were saying, was I think life has been too easy in the West,
Mm-hmm.
like we haven't had a real war, we haven't had a real war in a long time. Not that I want one, not at all. We won't even,
Yeah.
I don't think we'll have one. I don't think we'll have one in the same sense that we ever had one. You won't have men on the ground. But anyway, it's another story for another time. But like you said, people have become, it's like water. So you don't realize the value in it. You don't realize it until it's gone. Like you said, it's it's just there, and you can't see what you have until it's gone. And I think that's the problem. I think that's also why people are so easy to hand it away. And I actually watched Charles Hoskinson's video yesterday. I don't know if you saw it. He was talking about vaccine passports, and he made a really important point, which I think is really hard to articulate, which is a real problem that we've had. Because people often say, what's the problem with a mask? What's the problem with a vaccine? What's the problem with this? What's the problem with that? It's not so much that in and of itself. It's more about, once we've set a precedent for mandating, taking away these certain freedoms, that precedent and that power can then be used in a very bad way in years to come. And then he compares it to blockchain technology and, let's say like Bitcoin, for example, and how you can't change those rules. Those rules are set in stone. Whereas now we have these emergency powers, lots of things can happen.
Yeah. I mean, that's exactly true. But what a lot of us don't realize is this isn't where the precedent is set. The precedent was
I
set a
hope not.
long time ago with the non-emergency powers. Think about all the other things. Oh, you have to have a license to drive a vehicle. Well, that sounds reasonable, right? Everyone should, you have to get a liquor license because this is, potentially dangerous. What's next? You have to have a sugar license because sugar can kill you probably faster than, maybe not than alcohol, but you know what I'm saying. Like, it's at what point do we start to abdicate our freedom and our responsibility? It's not at where we decided to let people mandate masks and vaccines. That's just the most obvious and latest trend, but it started a long time ago. And that's, when did we let people say you must use this piece of paper for money, otherwise you're a criminal if you try to use gold, for example? When did we let government tell us we couldn't trade with whatever we wanted? Legal tender laws, right? Like that, it wasn't that a huge red flag? Wasn't that a huge precedent set that then they can just determine what we use? And yeah, I mean, that's the thing about, obviously cryptocurrency, but also just the freedom movement in general, is it's not a resistance, it's a rollback. We're rolling back all the mistakes of the past generation. And bit by bit, this was not good. Let's make a better version. And so money is a great way to start, because, you start with money, and then what else can you do? How can you give people more rights? How can you, all these like antiquated laws? And so, like, for example, I remember a few years ago, there was a law in New Hampshire on the books that was unenforced for like 100 years that made like adultery a crime. That if you cheated on your spouse, that was like a crime. And it was just on the books because like no one enforced it anymore because the world moved on. But it's still, one of my friends saw to it that that law was repealed. And it's, it doesn't, no one's life changes, but it's still a mistake of the past. Roll it back. And that's
Yes.
kind of all we're trying to do here.
So just lastly then, I guess like in a one-liner, do you think that we will ever get to a point in society, because society, I'm old enough and smart enough at this point to know that sentiment changes. So do you think we'll get to a point where sentiment changes and freedom will be will be truly valued and put at the forefront?
Yes, absolutely. And I think it's already happening very fast. The thing
That's
is,
good.
what people don't necessarily understand about freedom, a lot of the people who are the biggest freedom advocates don't understand necessarily that the freedom is also the freedom to not be free. And a lot of people will choose to live in places with different jurisdictions that inhibit their freedom because they kind of like that. They think they like that. It just,
Oh, they do.
as long
They
as
do.
there is a choice for the people who care about freedom to go there, then what happens over time is the after effects of freedom. Like the whole idea of America, like this is not a special country. There's so many beautiful countries all across the world. The only reason why anyone cared about America to begin with was because it had a better freedom climate than anywhere else. And then people saw it, people didn't think, oh, I like the idea of freedom, I'm going to move there. They just saw stuff was going great here, and then they wanted to move. And it's the same thing about, like, there's hellhole places in the US that most people are leaving, right? And they're going to other better areas that have a freer jurisdiction, just not because, oh, conceptually freedom, but because they're like, where I live has a ton of crime. It's extremely expensive. I can't go outside without covering my face. I can't go to my restaurant. This is better. I'm going to go to the better place. And so basically about is freedom in our future? Absolutely, for the people who choose it. And over time, the free market, right, in a competitive environment between unfree and free, the best solution always wins. And the freer places will rise to the top. And then the people who chose the unfree places will start to change their mind, and they won't know that it's because of freedom, but it will be because of freedom.
Absolutely. It's the same as people leaving California to go down to Texas to vote Democrats. They don't know why they're leaving. They don't know why they don't like California, but they'll vote for the same rules, which ruined it anyway. Joel, it's been such a pleasure. This was so last minute, but it's been so interesting talking to you. So I want to thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah, no problem. It's been a distinct pleasure as always.
Absolutely. And guys, thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to tune in next week for another amazing discussion, most probably around freedom and Bitcoin. All right. Have a great day. Bye.